Good morning. Got Representative Martinez, Senator Kirt in. Good to have you both. Hey, there was a lot of these runoffs are interesting. We'll talk about that in the next segment. But nonetheless, Logan Phillips, who's a colleague of yours in the House, was defeated, though, in the primary, and the governor was against him in that particular deal, has come out and said enough about these gear funds, and he files a lawsuit. I think his lawyer is also a colleague, saying we need more transparency. I want to know what happened to this money, and it's like Logan Phillips versus Ohms and the governor.
Yeah, this is a very strange situation. I don't know about sitting legislators suing the executive branch and how that falls in terms of our responsibilities, but we do have to have accountability for those monies, and if we feel like we're not getting that accountability, how do we get there? It sounds like he's trying to push along that deadline. We have some problems with open records. Our state doesn't have a lot of teeth to open records law. It's very much on the agencies to say if they have records on things. So we don't have the transparency we need to make sure these funds have been spent well. All we have is the federal report so far.
Okay, so we turn to the House. There are so many subtexts here. I mean, not the least of which is the governor taking on sitting members of his own party, statewide races, legislative races. But you understand this money that's come into the state because of the pandemic. Explain to us how this is all working.
Yeah, so you know there's a big chunk of money that came into the states, and the goal was to have emergency funds as we went through the pandemic to be able to help people that were struggling. These dollars were specifically geared towards education and to help some of the education loss and some of the things that happened due to the pandemic. There have been a lot of questions and a very damning audit that came out from the federal government about the way some of those dollars were spent. And my colleague, Representative Phillips, I totally understand why he wants more transparency. I'm more concerned about the $18 million that's still sitting there that hasn't been spent, and we have until September 30th to spend it.
I know you've had your differences with the governor, and so this story is going to go on and on. All right. Oklahoma lost a really good hand this week when Secretary of Energy Senator Ken Wagner is resigned. He's going to go back to the private sector. He's done a lot for the state and a lot for energy in Oklahoma.
Yeah, absolutely. So Secretary Wagner has done a great service to Oklahomans. I do like his policy that is all in. Every kind of energy is going to have to be part of the equation to move Oklahoma and the United States forward to continue to be a leader. So I appreciate that. I appreciate his work. Now, I do know that he is going to the private sector, but he will continue to be an asset to this state, and his knowledge is great. And we're so grateful for his service, and we just wish him a lot of blessings in what he does in the future.
Yeah, so OSU got him. He's going to be running that big energy center. This guy has taken care of renewables, oil and gas industry, and especially hydrogen. His legacy is going to be long-lasting in Oklahoma.
You know, one of the things I really appreciate about Secretary Wagner is that he learns on the job. You know, he was a part of the federal Environmental Protection Agency. You know, people think that folks who get appointed there have to be partisan hacks. They don't. He approached that as someone who was learning on the job. He did the same thing when he came to the state of Oklahoma. He wasn't there to implement a specific partisan agenda. He wanted to learn. He came and met with people across the aisle. He spent a lot of time out in the field trying to understand what the challenges are in different parts of the state. I know he spent a ton of time in southeastern Oklahoma. Those are qualities we need in these public servants.
Good luck to Secretary Wagner, and he's not going to be that far away, so we'll be seeing him in the future, I'm sure. When we come back, runoff election, people being triggered?
No, I'm not sure. We'll talk about it in a minute.
Hey, we're back. The runoffs are here. Not as many people show up in the runoffs, so there's a lot of questions. Dr. Gaddy was here talking about ranked voting that could solve this in the future. But let's just put it this way. Voting is happening today and Tuesday, and your thoughts about the runoffs?
Yeah. So you're right that voter turnout is low in primaries. It gets even lower in runoffs. I think it'd be an overreaction to think we have to revamp the whole system to try to solve the problem. I don't think it would. I think you would still have the problem where less people are showing up to vote. There's only one way to remedy that issue, and that's for people to get engaged with their government, to vote, to show up when they have that opportunity. Remember that these big decisions are made by people that show up. So I encourage you to get out, vote, make your voice heard. I know it's tempting to disengage in this time when things seem so tumultuous. I would argue it's time to do the opposite and get more engaged.
Okay, so the campaigns that have the best get out the vote apparatus, they win. But it's a real small segment of the population that determines these elections.
Yeah, I mean, what I hear from people is just they don't like the hyper-partisan part. This tends to be the time when only the most zealous partisan folks are involved, and that's a case to me for open primaries. The Democratic Party has decided to make their primaries open to independents. Republican Party could choose to do the same thing. How do we let more people participate? There's a lot of barriers right now for them to participate. We have challenges around voter registration. They still can't register online. We have extra barriers put in place for absentee ballots. So people don't find it straightforward to vote. So if it also doesn't feel like their voice is going to be heard, they're less likely to participate.
Okay, so this has been an interesting runoff. I mean, we've seen lawsuits, allegations, investigations, the media talking about domestic violence allegations, which they've done a poor job of covering. But the fact is that it has become kind of a circus at the end. Stepping outside of the Big Ten, right? What are you watching for in the results Tuesday night?
You know, my big concern is the state superintendent race. I know that public education has faced many barriers, many challenges throughout COVID. We continue to invest less than the regional average per student. And are we going to get a state superintendent who has chosen to slander teachers and pander to a very far-right base? Or are we going to get an educator to lead our education entities? I sure hope it's the educator coming out of the Republican primary, because otherwise what I see is the lack of trust in our schools that has been reinforced through these political seasons.
Your thoughts about what you'll be watching for Tuesday night?
Yeah, so I think we touched on it. I'm always interested in see what voter turnout looks like, who showed up to vote, and what they're saying. I do find it interesting that the conversation is around Republican primaries. I think it would suggest that even my colleague knows that Republicans are going to win whoever wins the Republican primary is going to win in November, and that's what matters. I urge voters to get out, make an informed decision. I do think that we have some excellent candidates across the board, whether you're voting for Congress, the U.S. Senate, the DA. There are some very big people on the ballot, some positions that matter and will affect your everyday life. Get out, get involved.
Yeah, it really does matter. So get out and vote, because your vote counts. See this again at news9.com/yourvotecounts and follow me on Twitter @MitchellTalks.